Welcome to the Dr. Digital Podcast. And what we have today is Massimo Zefferino. I can't believe I am lucky enough to get this guy on the show because he's been in the branding and design business for a long time. He's got a cool t-shirt. So it's like all kinds of cool stuff we got to get to. So I want to make sure that we have some time to do that. But of course, this is the only podcast that is dedicated to business leaders, CEOs who would like to grow their business through social audio. We were just chatting a little bit before, and what we were saying is this is kind of like the Wild West of the internet. You better believe it. So hang on, buckle up. And if you stick around the end, we've also got a good complimentary surprise for you. So with that as an introduction, Massimo is a B2B tech brands design. What he does is meaningful connections between their products and users. You got to hear what he has to say. 24 years, a creative design agency, zfactor. And with that as a basic introduction, thank you for picking up some time and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mick.
You bet. So can you tell us a little bit about your background? How did you get started? What's the story of getting into the whole design business in the first place?
So, I'm one of those few examples, one of those few stories where it's kind of the only thing I ever wanted to do. I was really, really, really blessed at a young age. I knew I was creative and I had to figure out how to make money being creative, right? And my first year in high school, I met a great teacher and she says, she's like, because I always had this goal, like, remember Who's the Boss? Remember the show Who's the Boss?
Sure.
So I remember when I was like, 7, 8 years old, I remember Angela Bauer going up and doing this presentation, this creative presentation, because she owned an advertising agency. And I was like, wow, I could do that. I want to pitch ideas to people, but I had no idea what it was and what it meant. It just felt right. Mm-hmm. And then when I got into high school, it was my first year of high school, and I took a course. It was called a graphic design course, and the teacher was like, you have art abilities. If you want to own an advertising agency one day, your route is through being a graphic designer. And so from that point on, when I was like 14 years old, it was just like I set a goal for myself that in 10 years I was going to have my own agency. And sure enough, we started in when I was 24 years old, literally. So yeah, and it's just been a great run ever since. I'm not going to lie. Went to school for design. Everything I took from that moment when she was, she kind of gave me that little glimpse of life. Every job I ever took was always, to gear me to that direction. Instead of doing a retail job at Walmart or something, I would take a retail job at a photography store. So I would learn about photography, right? Instead of, just working at a cash register, I took sales. I would do a sales position. So I would learn how to do sales. So every decision from that point forward, just kept me on track. It kept me on target. So I was one of the few that actually, this was the only option I had, because I was a creative, and thank goodness I could figure out how to make money being a creative. So I wasn't a starving artist, to say the least.
It's if there's a little bit of desperation, but I mean, it's great to get a focus, because I've talked to a few people. You're right. It's very unusual because people will go through college and major in something and has nothing to do with their real life. So, I mean, that's really awesome from a young age, really get a focus and knowing that. But I think one of the questions I was curious about, now you've really been in the game for a long time. What would you say are some of the changes that you've seen, like when you first started in high school, your view, and as you've gotten into the field for so many years?
So I can't even talk about high school and what high school and college was like, because that's just not even fair. Because back then, I mean, I remember, learning my first Mac, like my first design programs on a Macintosh. And I mean, they were so not even made for the industry at that time. They were all, very rasterized, very low res, but it was just kind of the early signs, right? But if I was to skip forward to when I started my business, at the very least, right? Because that's when I started understanding that things really had to take a turn. Because even in college, they were still teaching manual mock-ups and such, which was, even at that point, I knew that was outdated. And I struggled with that because I'd already been in a Mac environment I had a very progressive high school. So we had a Mac studio there. So when I actually went to design school and they wanted to take us back to basics and still do letraset and typography, it was challenging, to say the least, because I knew they were teaching us things that were already outdated. So I'm just gonna that wasn't the best experience, unfortunately. But then when I started my business, it was a unique point in the industry, because it was 1998 is when I started my business. And the internet was just starting, literally. like to be a public mass where people were just adopting it. We would, unplug our modem once a day and our fax machine once a day, plug it into the modem and check to see if you had a email, right? One. So,
Sure.
and I mean, that's what it was. And then by, early 2000s websites, I mean, you remember what they were like even early Amazon stuff. It was just, it was ridiculous, but you knew this was the future, but we were still very much in a big print based world. And so everything that we did was still print focused. There were still trade shows, there were still magazines that we dealt with, customers still did ads and placed ads, everything. So, the world was still very much, an old school traditional media, right? Then skip ahead, 12 years midway from, when I started the business to, like 2010, there was almost a split, a divide where you could see the pendulum swung completely the other way. Right. And it was just, anything that was print was just not cool anymore. You saw magazines drop, you saw local newspapers struggling, and technology finally got to a point where, either you had to adopt
Yeah.
or you would die. And, when we started our business, there was 34 other advertising agencies in town. And, at that 12-year mark, a lot of them couldn't make that transition. They couldn't figure out how to take what they were doing offline and
Right.
putting it online. And that was the one thing that we embraced immediately. Like, I knew if we were going to make this, because this was the only thing. I burnt my bridges. There was no going back for me. I was all in this life choice. So it was a matter of, let's figure out how to take what we do so well offline and put it online, where a lot of other people were just, slapping up silly brochures online and just, being a very thin digital imprint. We were already experimenting with very deep websites and trying to grab people from, the print world to the digital world. And it was received very well at that point. So while we saw a lot of our competitors just disappear, we flourished. And that was probably the best thing that we could have done, of course. Now, skip ahead yet another 12 years. You're starting to see the entire, I mean, again, we just talked about it, it's the Wild West.
Yeah.
Anything seems to go online. But you are seeing a huge resurgence, in trade shows again. Maybe it was just coming out of this lockdown for 2 years, but trade shows are just through the roof. There's backlogs. People can't get, retractable banners and trade show booths, just because everybody's now in a rush to get back out there. And people are trying to incorporate print again in this. So there's new demand for print, but it's shorter rate. So, what we had to do is keep evolving with the times. And I mean, honestly, I think over the past 24 years, we've evolved. We had to change our business model to adopt, I think it was 5 different times, going from strictly to print. And then, we were specialists in the trade industry. So there was a recession, industrial recession. So we had to pick up and then move to technology. Then from there, the internet just blew up. So we had to then adopt the internet. Then came this global economy. Right now, we were seeing competition all over the world for what we did, because now it was, why do I have to pay you your rates here? I can get it for a friend. So we had to continuously keep evolving our business model, and we still are on a regular basis. So I think that's something that we've managed to do very well. And again, it feels like after the past 5 to 7 years, it's all finally come together. And all the evolving, all the learnings, all the experience we have has actually helped us, become the company we are. So crazy. It's been a crazy time.
It's a wild time. I was going to touch on some of the hot growth areas, but you did sort of evolve into that in part of your answer, because these are the things that we'd say, well, what about like right now? What would you say are some of the hot areas? You actually started talking a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, again, it's just crazy. I mean, prior to COVID, of course, or during even the COVID lockdowns, hot area was anything digital, right? And I mean, people jumped on that bandwagon quick, and you saw that. You saw people, starting to do. They would start up businesses, and do virtual birthday parties, right? Because they were embracing digital. Sure. This is here. This is now. How are we going to do it? Just because, unfortunately, the world's in lockdown doesn't mean that a parent doesn't want to give their kid a birthday party. Right? Exactly. So, and then other companies, some entrepreneurs went and started doing custom backdrops, right? Because again, just like you've got a custom backdrop on your Zoom, nobody was using their corporate. Everybody could see a horrible bedroom like what I got going on over here. I probably really should put a different kind of backdrop on here. But the reality is people were adopting. And I think that was the key to all of this. So, I think a matter of, just adopting digital and just taking it and just running with it is the goal.
Mhm. So what would you say for like business owners, the person who is a non-design person and
Yes.
you're the design person for a business? Because like you say, I brand because I got to think I'm the young man with the old cars. I say it. Quick, but what would you say to a business owner if they don't grasp the idea of design and branding? What would you say to them?
Oh, if they don't understand. So design on a good note, there's no excuse anymore for anybody to elevate the look of their company to be, I mean, there's so many free resources online that nobody should have a subpar logo anymore, because this is what, unfortunately, people will judge you based on, your business, the way your business looks, your brand, going out into the marketplace. So I mean, design wise, there's so many free resources that even if they don't want to actually invest in it, you can go online and get free logos anywhere. There's logo generator. Sadly, if you're a small company, you've got a tight budget, and you don't want to actually invest, that's fine. But there's no excuse for somebody to have subpar branding, right? A brand is the most important thing a company can have. They need to own a space, because a brand, but I mean, at the same time, the brand is more than just the logo itself. And that's what people have to understand. It's more than the logo, but it's the overall impression that they leave in a consumer's mind, right? And that's
Sure.
key. So, of course, your visual identity is a huge part of that. But then, of course, it's the experience they have with you, the experience they have after dealing with you, right? Like, it's so easy to lose a customer these days. And really all it takes is one bad experience.
Sure.
So, more than the design, although, I embrace design, of course, I'm passionate about it. I think companies really need to, figure out what they want that brand promise to be. They're going to promise something, they're going to promise to deliver something to that customer every single time, and then make sure every single part of your company is in line with that promise. So
Mhm.
everybody always says, "Oh, our customer service is much better than anybody else's." It's like, okay, prove it. Make sure every single person, from the guy who shows up at your technician who shows up at your customer's house, to the person who answers the phone, to the person who replies to emails, even the collections person. Even if something happens and the invoice is now 60 days late instead of 30 days late, there's a way to handle that. So people say customer service, but do they actually live it?
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of brand promises. I think more than anything.
And it's really, I like the way you describe that because, yeah, branding is a lot of things. It's like the logo and what have you, but it's really the way that you're really interacting with your clients and your customers. That is part of your branding as well. So if you're as nice to the guy who's dropping the packages off as you are your biggest client, I mean, that's a successful relationship you have with people.
Absolutely, absolutely. Like, it's funny, we think our brand is one thing, but the customers who deal with us, our customers on a daily basis, have a completely different impression of what our brand is,
Mhm.
right? And the funny thing is, so we have positioned ourselves as a B2B tech, as a B to, sorry, as a brand design or a brand and creative design agency that focuses on B2B technology companies. That's our position in the marketplace. That's our niche. We study that, we own that space, we live and breathe it. You can make that your brand. But once our customers start working with us on a daily basis, interacting with us, they get the work, they realize that our brand is actually, we're a get shit done company, right? Like, they come to us because they know that at all odds we can deliver, we will deliver, whether it's tight deadline, whether it's like what realistically they can get within a short amount of time, what they can get a bigger amount of time. Because I guess a lot of people in our space, unfortunately, they dawdle too much, they overthink everything, they put way too much time and energy into analysis paralysis, where it's like, we're more of a belief that it's much better to deliver something earlier and then monitor it,
Yeah.
right? And see what the feedback is like, and then iterate as you go along, right? So that's our brand. But the funny thing is, it's not necessarily how we would think of our brand to be, or how we
Sure.
position ourselves.
Yep.
So it's a little different, right?
And one of the things we were saying about is how do people get a hold of you? Because I think that's one of the key things. You're relationship oriented, and that is part of your branding. So I'm the business owner. I want to get in touch with you. What do I do, and how do I get in touch with you?
So I mean, for us, it's we gave up